Male-female dynamics are not in a good place right now. Whether it's men feeling like they're a creep or predator until proven innocent, or women feeling like men are holding their rights under siege. Women vilifying men or men objectifying women. Both the sexes' attitudes towards the other are seeing rapid deterioration, and the result is a political spectrum severely polarized. The left has an overrepresentation of women, and the right has an overrepresentation of men. And both sides are barely in contact anymore beyond the slurs they throw, trying to see how much they can lower the bar. On the female side of the divide, everything must make way for the one value of equality, while men are increasingly abandoning equality and caring only for things like liberty and strength. So how did we get here? Let's take a look at one of the biggest problems of our generation. If we're going to try and figure out why young men and women are so politically divided, we have to start by going one level deeper and considering the shared struggle which our generation as a whole is engaged in. Indeed, a struggle more fundamental than that with environmental pollution or any kind of cultural dilemma. The struggle with meaninglessness. We, as young people in the West, but outside of it too, were born after what many of our parents considered to be the end of history, with the fall of the Soviet Union and the rise of a unipolar American world. The great ideological struggles of the 20th century had resolved to leave capitalism and democracy as the ideal systems by which man should live, and the human destiny was, apart from the maintenance of said systems, and the occasional skirmishes in countries that hadn't adopted them yet, complete. There was no particular need for anything to be done anymore. Not for the waging of war, nor for the rebuilding of cities, and certainly not for the settling of new space. Life, then, was considered to be something that was for oneself, an occasion to reap the fruits of a peaceful globe, so long as one kept from stirring trouble for others. Existence became, or so it was held to be, nothing but the chance to take the things one wanted. Meaning, however, is not in the taking of things, or in self-interest. Meaning is to mean a thing to somebody else and, with society leading us to believe that all was pretty much done already, and that there was nothing of great necessity or indeed significance left to do, it was as if the universe was telling us never mind, and like nothing was wanted from us. Now the reaction to this experience of meaninglessness has been diverse, but the gist of it has been quite universal, and that young people at present are caught in a pathological search for the validation of their expression, for a receiving end to their insights or to their gifts. We are like loose particles, flying around wildly, trying to dump our positive charge somewhere where it will be received, breaking the older connections that lie in our path apart, if we have to. Indeed, there is a strong sense that this way of life, this lack of purpose, is unendurable, and that there can be no continuation of society unless we find a way to bind our gifts somehow. Men and women, as it would seem, agree in this matter to a large extent, and both find that they are in a state of chaos and that there must be change. As we shall see, however, there is a divergence from this point onward as to how exactly society should be changed and reformed. For men, the reformation of society tends to quite literally be a reformation, where we would undo many of the recent processes of secularization or emancipation, to retrieve a more traditional form of living together. A way of life that, though rigid, had a place for everyone and valued us as more than the self-interested economical units we are seen as today. For women, however, these older societies and ways of living tend to present a vision of limitation, given that great talent or promise used to be sought only in men. Women were not necessarily valued less in the past, but the spectrum of what they had to offer was considered to be significantly less broad, and so traditionalism tends not to draw the women of this generation, barring a minority who feels they would be properly appreciated under that way of life. Women, for the most part, seem to long for a society which validates everyone equally, such that they are considered as gifted beings and talented, but will not have to engage in conflict with men to prove this. Men, after all, tend to be very serious about conflict, and scary to be in conflict with, relatively speaking, this being a consequence of the fact that they do not have a lot to fall back on if they should fail. Society has traditionally cared about young women in a more unconditional way than it did about young men, as even if they cannot prove themselves to offer other things, young women can still offer children. Men, however, if they cannot prove themselves, have nothing to offer to society, and have tended to be discarded. Proving oneself, then, tends to be ingrained for men as a matter of life and death, whereas for women it is not, and in many cases they may be startled by just how harsh the male conflict tends to be. Now the obvious consideration arises. Maybe men shouldn't feel like proving themselves as a matter of life and death, given that, in the society which women would like to create, everyone will be valued regardless of whether or not they prove themselves. The thing about such a society, though, is that not everyone has just as much to offer as everyone else does. That is not a moral judgment, nor do we say that anyone is inherently better than anyone else. A person who has less to offer is just as much of an integral part of the world as someone whose gifts are greater. The person who has more to offer, though, is going to have to be approached with a great deal more validation if they are going to truly actualize themselves. Just as a particle with a greater positive charge needs to meet with other particles that together have a negative charge to match it. Or like how a puzzle piece that has 4 extensions must be surrounded by 4 breaches and not by an equal amount of breaches and extensions. It is the only way for the person in question to express their whole self and for them to fit into the world. The equality first society which modern women tend to strive for, then, makes people who thought that they were not enough feel that they are enough, but only at the cost of making other people feel like they are too much. Social issues are diverted, but not truly mended, and the same unrest persists. Now, none of this is to say that there cannot be a healthy society that is, for lack of a better term, female-dominated. Indeed, men tend to be quite comfortable following women's orders, if only the thing they do are for the woman and not for some convoluted system of correct and incorrect that the woman has devised. Meaning needs to be personal. It involves humility and any sort of general validation distributed like a token, no matter who people are or what they do, simply doesn't work. Either the men who have more to offer than they are validated for break through, and they instate a society that is very harsh and founded in cynicism, or they are manipulated into expressing themselves by fighting each other, thus instantiating a very nasty society that is based in fatalism. In neither case do we find society at harmony with itself, and in both cases the brutality is endless. The only way to have progress, true progress, is through our appreciation of each other, with a care for what it is that we personally bring to the table, and what we personally need. Right now we seem to be at a bit of an impasse, where most of us tend to come from a place where we were always considered for what we needed, but rarely for what we had to offer, this being a relationship to our parents. They held that our lives in this world after history were a gift from them, carrying themselves with no humility over the fact that we were first and foremost born as a gift to them. We have, then, a perpetual imbalance in our giving and our taking sides, where we are on the one hand oversaturated with the supposed generosity of our parents, whilst our giving side has been rebuffed and frustrated. In contemplating a way out of this predicament, the simplest solution shows itself quite clearly in that our parents should appreciate us more. We did not ask to be born, yet they wanted children and so we came to be. There is no selfishness involved on our part there, and we have never needed them as much as they needed us. This solution could be how we, as young people, escape the ever more chaotic dynamics of this time. We have to be realistic though. This isn't how it's going to go. Our parents, as a generation, were born under the nuclear threat, whereby everything could be destroyed from one day to the next and nothing they did would matter. Their mechanism for coping with this, which has become lifelong, has generally been to admit to no selfishness, or agency for that matter. If they had children, it was their natural impulses forcing them to. If they raised them, their children wouldn't owe them necessarily, but they kind of would. There's no responsibility of thought there that would allow for the consideration that they, in any interaction, have been the egotistical party, and that will be who they are even on the day when the bomb might drop. If we're going to redeem ourselves, it has to be in breaking with our parents, in a show of force, making it evident that we do not need them. Getting there is difficult, as they, being the older generation, hold most of the cards. Indeed, sometimes it may seem as if the only way to show that we don't want the world they are said to have given us is by simply leaving that world, but that isn't true. We can reduce that which we receive, take our distance, without harming ourselves. Minimalism, fasting, silence, these are the ways to show that we have no need of them, or of the things they build. Take pleasure in imagination, and in each other's company. This is how we make a society that is neither harsh nor nasty.